The European Commission will this week publish its blueprint for a new EU-Africa strategy, which it hopes will kickstart EU-Africa relations. The Africa strategy is to be a key strand of the geopolitical EU executive of Ursula von der Leyen. But will it point the way to a genuine partnership? Last week, EU and ACP negotiators agreed to extend the Cotonou Treaty until the end of December, an admission that they are still away from finally negotiating and ratifying a new treaty. On the post-Cotonou Treaty, although there has been a delay until December, there is still a timeline to move very fast. International Partnerships Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen have said that the talks need to be concluded by April, even though some member states are doubtful that this can be done. However, this desire to move fast reflects the fact that the EU really does not want the Cotonou process to become overlapped with the EU-Africa summit, which will take place in October in Brussels. At last week's EU-AU summit in Addis Ababa, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was very clear that the EU wants to hear African leaders' input into this strategy paper. But the question is whether that's just talk or whether the EU really plans to listen and for this to become a real partnership. And if we're talking about a real partnership, then there's going to need to be compromise from both the EU and African sides.
We should not follow the notion of expecting the African Union to adapt to the European Union. But a true partnership is to explore possibilities together.
The EU took 10 of its 27 commissioners to Addis, a sign, says Brussels, of its commitment and goodwill. The paper thus far appears as though it will spell out the areas that the EU would like to cover in its partnership, and that would include sustainable growth and jobs, a green transition, digital and data transformation, peace, security, governance and resilience, migration, and mobility and multilateralism. That appears to be rather a long shopping list, but as yet there's not much substance behind these policy aspirations. The launch of the communication on 6th March starts a typically Brussels-esque negotiation process. Foreign ministers will discuss the document and agree their conclusions later this spring. Heads of state at the EU level will have a summit in June, at which they will be expected to agree a final version, and then that will go to the EU-African Union Summit in October, when EU leaders and the African Union will be expected to agree on the final blueprint. One of the problems that the EU faces is that it is far from being the only international player vying for greater political and economic relations with the African continent. The UK, India, Turkey, Russia and France are all among a group who've either hosted or are holding Africa-focused investment conferences in 2020. Across the pond, meanwhile, the US administration of Donald Trump has also begun to flesh out its new trade and investment offer to African leaders. Much of the rhetoric from the von der Leyen Commission has been about partnerships, including with Africa. But a real partnership requires a real negotiation process. And in the past, there has been a sense among African leaders that they were being dictated to by Brussels. But with so many international players competing for Africa's attentions, the EU's mindset is going to have to shift.